ACT, SAT prep course, addressing the optional essay strategies if you decide to take the essay section. And if you have questions, you should be able to see a chat bar that you can type into. And I can also type as well. I'm not going to do a lot of that. I'll show you what mine looks like. Just say hi. Hello. And I believe you can either respond in the chat bar or you can go to the question section. I will probably close my toolbar, so I won't be able to see your questions until the end. So if you have them, please type them in. Try to be specific, me about the slide number or the slide you're talking about if you have questions, and I will address them at the very end. That's the plan. All right, folks, the ACT, SAT optional essay. It is, in our opinion, a very good idea to take the optional essay. All right. For the SAT, it is the optional last section of the test. Similarly, for the ACT, it is the optional last section of the test. We'll talk about the optional element of it. We say optional, but we really highly recommend it, and we'll explain why. Just to kind of, we're not really digging into a lot of depth right now, but just to prepare you, you should expect to produce what we're calling elevated rough draft quality. We're not expecting a polished essay. They are not expecting a polished essay. They can't expect somebody to produce, perfectly edited, polished, beautiful work within a time limit whenever you're completely writing it cold with no real prep and you don't really have a chance or an opportunity to do any research. So it should just be elevated rough draft quality, but it should still have effort put into it. And we'll explain what we mean by that here in just a minute. Colleges differ in their requirements. I will say, I know there are people here that are from all over the country. I am in Ohio, and I know that in Ohio, none of the colleges in the state require the written section. You will want to check the college of your choice or the colleges that you are applying to and see what the requirements are for them. Many of the colleges, even if they don't require them, will take them for English placement sorts of purposes, and we'll get into that eventually. Some schools will require the essay score to determine your admission in. Like I said, none of the schools in Ohio require that, but there are schools obviously outside of Ohio that you might be applying to. Some of them require the essay score to determine English placement. And some schools don't want it at all. So it would be a good idea before you dive into it to at least get an idea of what you need, depending on what schools you're looking at. But I will tell you a sad story. There was a student that we know who took the other sections of the ACT, scored a 28 composite, and then looked at the school of his choice and realized that he needed the written section, and it was December. So he had to go back on his senior year and retake the entire ACT, including the written section, because you are not allowed to isolate them. You have to take, all of them all together for your score to count. So don't be that guy. And be absolutely sure that you do or do not need it, and you might want to just take it just for good measure. It's not a bad idea at all. So especially if you feel like you're a strong writer or you feel like the essays you wrote in your English class are pretty easy and straightforward, then you're definitely going to have an advantage in this. We recommend that you take the essay portion at least one time. Some states will administer tests through schools. Ohio does that at times, and they don't include the writing portion. So that's something to bear in mind. Don't forget that it exists just because you took it one time in your junior year and they didn't include the writing portion. It is something that is there, and it might be vital. You never know. All right, let's talk about the ACT for a while. We'll talk about the SAT second. So if you are focusing on one or the other, so you know kind of what's coming at you, you know when to zone in. As we've been saying, the ACT essay section is optional, and they are asking that you write a persuasive piece of writing. You know the 3 different types of writing: expository, persuasive, and narrative. This is persuasive. You will have a prompt, and you will be given some information on the issue and also 3 perspectives on that issue for a specific reason. You're going to need all 3 of those perspectives. You are going to be developing your point of view, and you're going to discuss it in relation to all 3 of those perspectives. So you're going to need to think about your opinion, your perspective, your viewpoint in relation to them. So yes, it is what's called a student-centered response, in that we want to know, or they want to know, what you think about it. But it is also, you also have to weave into it all 3 of those perspectives. Something to note is that there are no thought police, and I'll return to this idea multiple times. There are no thought police, so you don't have to honestly and authentically have a deeply emotional perspective on any of these. You just need to pick a side and stick with it. And in fact, it might benefit you to pick kind of maybe the opposite of what you actually think if there are more supporting details on the opposite side. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So just remember, there are no thought police. They're not going to come after you and listen in on your phone and figure out what you really think about the ACT prompt and take off your score because of that. That's not a thing. As long as you can write persuasively, you're good to go. All right, and it is always the final section, the very, very end. After you've taken all the other sections, it will be the last one. And they give you 40 minutes to complete it, which should be plenty of time. Because as I'll get into later, it is not about length. It's about organization, structure, support, etc. And once again, it needs to be elevated rough draft quality, which means they're not going to dock you if you don't have a completely polished, research with footnotes, perfected college-level essay. This is elevated rough draft. They know that you are writing it within 40 minutes. You're handed this prompt cold, and you're just going for it. So they're strict and they're exacting, but they are not mean. And it's not going to impact your overall composite score. As we said, colleges use it for a variety of reasons: admissions, placement, but it's not going to impact your composite. All right, you'll be scored anywhere from a score of 2 to 12. Obviously, you're going to aim for a 12. And how that is broken down is there are 2 graders. Your essay will be given to 2 separate graders to try to make it kind of 2 different perspectives, because every human is, different. And it gives you a better chance of getting a broader perspective on what you wrote. And I happen to know that each of the score graders provide 6 of the 12 points. So it adds up to 12. So the graders are individuals trained to score according to a rubric. I don't know if you are familiar with the term of a rubric. It's those big charts with numbers on them and written out expectations that your teachers have probably given you, and they give you some sort of big assignment, an essay or something like that. And what that really is kind of I don't want to say contract, but it's evidence. And as a teacher, I can tell you that when I grade with a rubric, it holds me to that standard. I can't just read an essay and be like, this feels like a B- to me. Rubrics force me to look at each individual element of the essay, the organization, the structure, the word choice. How well does the thesis, respond to the prompt? How well do the main points respond to the thesis? What about supporting details? What about the mechanics and usage and grammar? It really makes you look at all the details and evaluate the student in great detail and really be able to back up the score that you give. If a student comes and says, I think this was worth an A, you could say, well, I'm sorry, but if you look here, 2 or 3 points are not really sticking to the thesis, and your supporting details are totally off the track, and these mechanics errors here and here and here. It keeps both the student and the teacher or the grader honest and specific and rigorous. So it's actually a really good thing, even though it looks like a big intimidating box of words and numbers. And we'll look at an example here in a little bit to see what a rubric is. So these graders are trained. They're going to follow a rubric, so it's not just what opinion they have. If they're in a bad mood that morning, they're going to give you a low score. They're sticking to that rubric. So it actually is an advantage for you. They're scored holistically, which means that in the same way that whenever you are going into the ACT or the SAT and you're reading a passage and you're asked, usually at the end of the section of questions, there's like, if you look at this passage as a whole, and they ask a question about it, that's the way that the graders are going to score your piece. So think of it kind of in reverse. So they're going to look at the main point of your thesis. They're going to look at your main points of structure. They're going to look at, does the language flow? They're going to look at, is it consistent? Is it relevant? And they're going to look at it as a whole. So if that helps you figure out how to write it, really think of it as a big, beautiful unit that should be well structured. That's how it will be scored. On the ACT, your essay will be scored in 4 areas and then averaged together to get the score of 12. We have the ideas and analysis element of it, the development and support, organization, which is going to be like your structure and what order does it go in and what kind of method did you choose to structure it, and language use and convention. So that's going to be mechanics and grammar and all that fun stuff. And I will go into more detail on this in a second. Those are the different elements that you're going to be assessed by. Here is an example of that rubric I was talking about, and I'm sure all of you have seen at least one example of this. I'm sure your teacher either showed it to you or handed it out to you when you got an assignment, when you got it graded. It actually goes, you can see it's counting backwards, score 6, score 5. It counts all the way down to 2 or 0. But I don't think you even need to look at those lower ones because you're going to aim for a 6, okay? And if you look at the different segments that you'll be addressed for your essay, let's just read them for a second. So under ideas and analysis, in order to score a 6, the writer generates an argument that critically engages with multiple perspectives on a given issue. The argument's thesis reflects nuance and precision in thought and purpose. The argument establishes and employs an insightful context for analysis of the issue and its perspective. The analysis examines implications, complexities, and tensions, and/or underlying values and assumptions. So that's a lot to take in and to think about. And you can definitely look at the recording of this or glance back at this if you want to see what you're aiming for at a later date. And we'll have some sample prompts you can kind of look at this in regards to kind of get the idea of what we're talking about. Under development and support, to score 6, you would need to have the development of ideas and support for claims, deep in insight and broad in context. An integrated line of skillful reasoning and illustration effectively conveys the significance of the argument. Qualifications and complications enrich and bolster ideas and analysis. So that's whenever you're kind of supporting your main ideas and main points with some details and anecdotes and examples and facts, that's what you will want to consider. Your organization is the next one over. The response exhibits a skillful organizational strategy. How did you put it together? The response is unified by a controlling idea or purpose, and a logical progression of ideas increases the effectiveness of the writer's argument. Transitions between and within paragraphs strengthen the relationships among the ideas. This is all about how you set it up. And if you just kind of fall back on that 5-paragraph essay or 4-paragraph essay structure that you've probably been doing your whole high school career, that's a pretty safe place to hang out. You're going to want your introduction and conclusion, and you're going to want to organize your main points with details and support. And it all should kind of flow upward toward that thesis. It should all be very loyal and faithful and relevant to the thesis. But it all circles back to. All right, finally, language use. The use of language enhances the argument. Word choice is skillful and precise. Sentence structures are consistently varied and clear. Stylistic and register choices, including voice and tone, are strategic and effective. While a few minor errors in grammar usage and mechanics may be present, they do not impede understanding. So that's something to bear in mind. You're not going to get, a point off or half a point off every error that they find. The readers are looking for readability, so they're willing to overlook little mistakes as long as it's not keeping them from, understanding what is going on. So that's, don't panic and waste time super hyper editing every little tiny where you put every comma. But you don't want it to impede your readability. Also, something to be noted, sentence structures are consistently varied and clear. If you have the same structure of a sentence over and over again, subject, verb, direct object, it gets a little clunky. Consider creating some complex sentences, some compound sentences, switch things up a little bit, make things interesting. It changes the rhythm and the cadence of the reading. And if you kind of think sympathetically perhaps about the grader, he or she has to grade, I don't know how many of these, a ton. And they're all probably of a decent length, and they're all probably rather dense. And if you can maybe dredge up a little bit of sympathy for an ACT grader, I don't know if you can manage that, but think about it from their perspective. Be the interesting one. Be the one that pops out as like, oh, that word choice was great. Oh, that was so precise. I love the fact that their sentences didn't have this like just droning, repetitive quality to them. Be the interesting one, and it will stand out, and they'll probably appreciate you, and probably it'll be good for your score. So think about it from that perspective. Think about someone who's reading a ton of these, and you want to be the one that stands out. All right, excellent. So that's what we're looking for. If you want to Google ACT Scoring Rubric for Writing, you can find that rubric, and you can actually see the entire thing. That'll take you all the way down to like the lowest score possible, but I don't even know why you need to look at that because you are aiming for 6. Or you can follow that link. You can copy paste that or write that into your address bar, and that will take you where you need to go. But yeah, rubrics are a good thing to glance over. I know they look stressful when you first see them, but they are really useful tools if you can just kind of be calm and wrap your brains around them. And as an English teacher, I can tell you I've spent a lot of time both using and writing and reading rubrics, and I regret to say that they're actually very useful. All right, so the organization of your essay. Of course, you're going to write an introduction. The introduction should be a direct response to the prompt. There should always be a very tight relationship between the prompt and the introduction. And if you can imagine kind of a funnel, I like the fact that the word funnel is used here. You're going to bring your reader in by setting up your context, and then you're going to funnel it down to your thesis. What is the main, I guess, the spear of what you're going to say? That's your thesis. What is the main drive of what you're going to say? So set us up, set the reader up. What are we talking about? Give us some context. And then what do you want to say to us? What do you want to convince us of? What do you want to tell us about? That is your introduction paragraph. And your thesis statement is going to be a commitment that you're making. You're going to want to, be very faithful, be very loyal to that thesis statement, and come back to it. That's what all your paragraphs are going to be about. Everything should be very relevant. Body paragraph 1. You are going to have a perspective that there are going to be 3 perspectives. You're going to disagree or agree with them, each of them, and you're going to kind of lump them into agree and disagree. So let's just say body paragraph 1 is going to be your agree paragraph. So maybe 1 or 2 of those perspectives that you agree with are the ones you're going to discuss in this body paragraph number 1. And I feel like it is a good idea to actually refer back to perspective 1 and perspective 2. I'm sure a lot of you have done research papers and used, cited your sources. You don't have to do like MLA format or anything like that because you don't have that information. But to say, according to perspective 1, according to perspective 2, that lets the grader know that you know where you got that perspective. And it makes it a lot less confusing as to where you're getting your information from, okay? And you're you're starting with this core of your perspective, and then you are connecting it to your perspective 1, perspective 2, perspective 3, which is your source, I guess, your primary source. But you're also going to pull in these other examples from your knowledge, your experience. You can pull in anecdotes, you can pull in facts if you remember them, and that will continue to support what you're trying to say and what your main perspective is in body paragraph 1, okay? So if you can think of a fact, if you can think of something that happened to you, if you can think of something you heard of happening to somebody else, those are all great elements of support for your body paragraph. And if you have a fact that you are 99% certain is correct, you're pretty sure about the date and you're pretty sure about the name, go for it. Obviously you can't like get your phone out and Google something while you're in the test because that's very bad. But if you're pretty sure you remember something, a fact about something, you can put it in there. I don't think it's going to cost you if you got the date wrong or something like that. Don't make things completely up out of nothing. No, just like make up random facts that are completely not true. That's just not a good idea. But if you're slightly off on a fact, I think that's okay. But yeah, supporting all the support you can give is great as long as it's very relevant and true to that main point you're trying to make in body paragraph 1, the stuff that you agree with. All right, moving right along. Body paragraph 2 will be the opposite, whatever you chose for the body paragraph 1. So if you've picked disagree for body paragraph 1, you're going to pick agree for body paragraph 2. If you picked agree for body paragraph 1, you're going to pick disagree for body paragraph 2. And you're going to address whichever perspective that you didn't already address. And you're going to explain why you agreed or disagreed with them, and you're going to once again have your specific examples emphasizing that and supporting it. Once again, anecdotes, facts, and so on. And make sure it's very clear and concise, and that it all is this beautiful connection to your main point in body paragraph 2, and that should connect up to your thesis statement. You should always be thinking about the thesis statement. It's the most important thing. And remember, you're going to want to do transition sentences that will lead you from, let me see if I can manage to do a pen here without messing things up. I'll do an arrow. Okay, so you should have a nice transition sentence that will take you from intro to body paragraph, right? Kind of gently tell the reader, we're switching gears here. We're going to body paragraph 1. And then you're going to want to make a bridge between body paragraph 1 to body paragraph 2, just kind of let the reader know what's about to happen. I always say mention like a little bit of something from body paragraph 1 and a little bit of something from body paragraph 2 to kind of just build a bridge between the two. Transition sentences, they can be tough, but if you can get them right, they are a very great way to make your writing look very graceful. Finally, your conclusion. Once again, that word funnel, which I think is great. You're funneling all that information from that thesis. If you've thoroughly explored your thesis, and now it's almost like the application of it. So we've made our point, so now what? What is the overall societal impact of what we're saying? In conclusion, this. In conclusion, application into real life or into society, okay? So you're going to want to wrap it up, tie a pretty little bow, and that's going to be your conclusion. It should be a couple of sentences. Some people have the fallacy of writing their conclusion, making it just be one sentence. In conclusion, you should la 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 la, or this is bad. No, we need a little bit more than that. We need a couple sentences at least. It's a paragraph, so technically it should be 4 to 8 sentences long. I'd say at least 3. If you're just really tired and you're done, at least 3. But aim for 4 or 5. Okay, so here is an example of an ACT prompt, so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. You have this little blurb up here. Where's my arrow? Your arrow. Sorry, I'm a little clunky with these tools. I apologize. You guys are very patient. Here's a little blurb, and I will read it to you, and then we'll look at perspectives 1, 2, and 3, and then what the actual essay task is down at the bottom. Okay, Intelligent Machines is the title, which is going to give you a little hint about what kind of the main point or emphasis is. You should always read the title and think about it. Many of the goods and services we depend on daily are now supplied by intelligent, automated machines rather than human beings. Robots build cars and other goods on assembly lines where once were human workers. Many of our phone conversations are now conducted not with people, but with sophisticated technologies. We can now buy goods at a variety of stores without the help of a human cashier. Automation is generally seen as a sign of progress, but what is lost when we replace humans with machines? Given the accelerating variety and prevalence of intelligent machines, it is worth examining the implications and meaning of their presence in our lives. Okay, there's a blurb. And they ask you to read and carefully consider these perspectives. Each suggests a particular way of thinking about the increasing presence of intelligent machines. So there's multiple elements here. You have a blurb, then you have people's perspective about the blurb. Perspective 1 is, what we lose with the replacement of people by machines is some part of our own humanity. Even our mundane daily encounters no longer require from us basic courtesy, respect, and tolerance for other people. All right. You have to think about if you agree or disagree with that. Perspective 2. Machines are good at low-skill, repetitive jobs and at high speed, extremely precise jobs. In both cases, they work better than humans. This efficiency leads to a more prosperous and progressive world for everyone. Another good perspective. Perspective 3. Intelligent machines challenge our long-standing ideas about what humans are or can be. This is good because it pushes both humans and machines toward new, unimagined possibilities. So we have 3 elements here. You may wholeheartedly agree with any of them, disagree with any of them, be indifferent to all 3 of them, who knows. But you need to decide that you agree or disagree with each of these, and you need to come up with reasons why. That's your job. So let's look at the task. Write a unified, coherent essay in which you evaluate multiple perspectives on the increasing presence of intelligent machines. In your essay, be sure to analyze and evaluate the perspectives given, State and develop your own perspective on the issue. Explain the relationship between your perspective and those given. Okay. Your perspective may be in full agreement with any of the others, in partial agreement, or wholly different. Whatever the case, support your ideas with logical reasoning and detailed persuasive examples. So once again, the same thing we've been saying, the same thing I've been saying. You are going to group your perspectives on these perspectives, your opinions on these perspectives, into agree and disagree. So obviously there are three, so you're going to lump, one of them into your paragraphs is going to involve two perspectives. But you are going to state your perspective and then connect your perspective to these other perspectives and loop in as support outside sources, okay? Obviously, you're not going to research things, but like I said, anecdotes, stories, facts that you remember, ideas. So that is your task. That's what your job is. This is the format you're going to be looking at whenever you're taking the ACT writing section. So let's look. Let me get rid of my little pointer and move right along. So here is a sample essay, and it is one that scored a 6. So this is kind of a good thing to aim for, obviously. And we'll take a second to look at this and see what we think of it. I will read it for you in my amazing voice. As technology improves and more tasks are completed by machines instead of humans, the question is no longer about what we can do with machines, but rather what we should. Although the usage of machines increases efficiency and our standard of living, it detracts from the value of human life. So you can see right there, we have context is here. Hold on a second, I need my arrow. Here's our context. And then right here we have that final sentence is the thesis statement. It's what the person believes and feels. Okay? As machines increasingly perform all our basic tasks, society is able to produce more. The additional production adds material value to our society and frees people up from these low-skill tasks. This is in agreement with perspective 2, which claims that this industrialization leads to more prosperity. For example, in the 18th century, short staple cotton that was grown in the southern United States required an immense amount of labor in order to separate the seeds from the fiber to process the cotton to make it marketable. However, in the mid-19th century, Eli Whitney, an American entrepreneur, invented the cotton gin, which allowed for the automation of cotton processing. This machine replaced the need for a large workforce for the process and greatly improved production. As a result of the cotton gin, short staple cotton production skyrocketed, increasing by more than 10 times in the South, while bringing prosperity to the region and setting in motion a new industrial era in America. This is in agreement with perspective 3, which says the mechanization allows for unimagined possibilities. Although there are clearly many advantages to industrialization, there are also some heavy drawbacks. So we have references to perspective 2 and perspective 3, and we have outside information. Eli Whitney, lots of information about the South. You can tell the person didn't remember exact dates, but they said mid-19th century, 18th century. Did remember increased by more than 10 times. So there are some facts in here, but it's totally okay to give a general idea or, in general dates, or even a slightly incorrect date. You can see that would be okay. You can kind of see the structure of what is expected of you. I'm going to the next page now, so you can see the second half of it. All right, so here's the rest of it. The replacement of humans by machines leads to the loss of value to human life, an effect that outweighs the material gains of automation. The search to find human tasks that can be performed by machines inevitably leads to comparisons between human and machine. If a company executive wants to see if an inventory management team can be replaced by a robotic system, he will compare the two and determine which can do a better job. When this occurs, the people on the team are evaluated not for their worth as human beings, but for their effectiveness at performing a specific function. In essence, as we would evaluate a machine. In a larger sense, when we begin to think about humans in this way, the worth of a person's life becomes dependent on only what they can do and no longer has any intrinsic value. As perspective 1 states, we begin to lose our humanity. This new mindset and way of evaluating people, though seemingly harmless in a workplace, is devastating when it begins to pervade a society. If a person is judged only on his or her capability, there is no reason for a person to remain after they've served their function. This would warrant genocide against the elderly and disabled because their burden on society would not be made up for by any production. Although the machines may seem to fulfill the low-skilled jobs at the moment, There is no barrier to prevent machines from replacing more. As the machines increase in intelligence, they will replace any tasks done by humans and render us unnecessary and worthless. Due to the risks of dehumanization, the material benefits of machines are not enough to justify its increasing presence. Now, I thought that was quite excellently written. You can see this next paragraph makes reference, once again, to another perspective, list perspective 1, and it also pulls in some philosophy, some personal opinions on the matter. It also brings in some, scary projections about what could happen in the future if that were the case. It's really very philosophical, honestly. So this is a really good paragraph. And like I know I said that you should have multiple sentences in your conclusion. This person did not, but clearly their writing capacity in the rest of the essay was enough to make the grader just be so thrilled and chilled by his writing that he or she scored a 6 on this. And I think this is pretty good writing. I am going to open up my toolbar for a moment, and if any of you have any thoughts or questions or observations you want to make about this essay, briefly, I'll wait a couple seconds and check out and see if there are any questions or thoughts. It's fine if you don't. I just wanted to see if anyone had any observations at the moment. I'm trying to be responsive to people here. As an English teacher, I can say that I would be very happy to get this essay. And I like the structure of it. I like the examples. I like the cohesion that it has. I like the relevancy to the thesis statement. I feel like it's very intellectual. I really like it. So well done, person who scored a 6. Good job. Looks like nobody has any observations to make, and that is completely fine. All right, I am going to click that and move right along to the next element. And if you do, I will maybe periodically check and see if there are questions. I can't see them once I have my toolbar closed, but I will try to check as often as I can. Okay, so a score of 6 is earned when it's an effective essay that represents strong responses to that writing task. So you really have to pay attention to the prompt. You can't just sort of say, oh, I understand the topic. I'm just kind of blather about the topic a little bit. That will not, loyalty to the prompt is essential. And I can tell you that as an English teacher, if you dodge the prompt, you are not going to. It doesn't matter if it is a golden essay. If you don't respond to the prompt, you're not going to get a good score. So as for ideas and analysis, it has a clear thesis. It propels the argument and engages multiple perspectives. It does a very good job of that, definitely. I definitely think it fulfilled that quite well. Development and support, the writer used an integrated line of reasoning and illustration to effectively convey and support the argument. And you can see that he or she used historical references, philosophical references, kind of scary futuristic projections about what could possibly happen, used logic. It was very well done. The organization was very, in line with the logical progression of it. It had a clear purpose. It was well organized. It was very relevant. Once again, the main points were relevant to the thesis statement. It was all very connected, which is what we're looking for and what the ACT graders are looking for as well. Use of language, there was elevated vocabulary. The words were put in the right place, so it wasn't like somebody put a big high-level vocabulary word in there that didn't really fit or didn't make any sense. It was where it was supposed to be. There was very good varied sentence structure that made it pleasant to read. It wasn't kind of clunky. Yeah, the person had definitely had a good vocabulary, which is helpful. So kudos to that person. I see a question. Let's see what's up. Okay, hold on a second. I shouldn't be on mute. Can anyone else hear me? I'm not on mute. I'm recording. Please, let's take a moment and let me know if you can hear me. Someone else, let me know if you can hear me. Because as far as I can see, I'm not on mute. Okay, good. Okay, you scared me there for a second. Shayna, I don't know. Oh, she left. Okay. I hope she knows she can listen to the recording later. Good. I'm glad you can hear me, Donald. Thank you. I had a little moment where I was afraid. Okay. All right. I just need to get rid of this screen. Okay, there we go. Thanks, guys, for being responsive. I appreciate you. Let me know if there are any other issues. Hopefully she'll log back in, and we will see her in a moment. Thanks, folks. I appreciate you. All right, so here's an example. You're definitely going to want to pre-write your prompt, and you'll have time. If you pace yourself, you'll have time. I know a lot of people don't like pre-writing. They think it's a waste of time, but it really, 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 really is not. I can tell you as an English teacher, we know when you have not done pre-writing. And you're going to want to map your ideas out. You really are. So take a moment, do some pre-writing. Here's an example of pre-writing that we kind of recommend. If you're looking back at perspective one, you're thinking, okay, I agree. You know, this is not my opinion or your opinion. We're not telling you what to think, but let's imagine we're the writer, right? And we're going through this. Okay, I read perspective one. I agree with perspective one. And then you kind of think of an example. Okay, automated answering services. I hate those. Let's talk about that. Good idea. Okay. And then you're thinking, okay, perspective two, there were some interesting ideas there. There's the idea of things going really quickly and efficiently, or like simple menial tasks that can be done by a machine. Those could be, okay, I agree, and I sort of disagree with that. I agree that maybe they shouldn't be doing like medical procedures. I don't know. Or maybe I do agree with that. Statisticians, I could agree or disagree with that. So you're adding some support. You're mapping out your support here. You're kind of building a little web of what you're going to write about. Just getting your ideas out on paper so you can organize yourself. Job satisfaction, yes, obviously, if you, that human element of having a job and doing it well and being able to add that kind of intrinsic humanity to it. And if you are, you know, eliminated from your job because it's replaced by a robot, that's something to consider and something that the essay writer did consider. And here's a thesis that you could come up with once you've kind of thought about all the things you want to say. I know it seems counterintuitive because theses are written in the very introduction paragraph, but what you really should do is think about all the things you're going to say and then come up with your thesis. Because it's almost like reverse engineering. You want to think about all the stuff and then boil it down into your spearhead that is your thesis. So the thesis that, you know, our pretend person came up with for their pre-writing was, although intelligent machines have advanced our society in many ways, they have reduced interpersonal relationships crucial to a thriving human race. So that would be a really good thesis statement that you could put at the end of your introduction paragraph, and then you could expand it out with these 3 points, and you'd have yourself a pretty good essay. So that's one method of pre-writing. You have a sheet, a page in your ACT essay writing section that is available for pre-writing that they won't like grade or look at. So you can use that, and I recommend that you do. All right, so with the prompts, I cannot say this enough. This is the case on ACTs and every other standardized test. You have to take a position. You have to pick one side or the other. You can't say, I can kind of see it both ways. You know, I can sort of see it this way, and then I can see it this way. That is an easy way to get a very low score. We don't, and the ACT graders do not want to see that. So don't, even if you honestly, in your heart of hearts, are really in between, just pick one side. Just do it, because it is really not a grand idea to waffle. You will lose a lot of points for that. Here's a thought. ACT, it's student-centered, so they're asking for your perspective about what you think about something, and then when it's coursed, you connect it to those other perspectives and you lace it in with your additional support. But it is, in its core, student-centered. It is your response. The SAT is going to be analytical. It's going to be about anything, but it's not necessarily, it's not going to be, the core of it is not going to be your perspective. And I'll get more into this as I continue. It'll make sense. So don't stress over your position. Your opinion will not affect your score. The graders don't have any sort of vested interest in what the outcome is or what your perspective is. So it's not like they're going to think, oh, I disagree with this kid, I'm going to give him a low score. Does not matter at all. All they care about is, can you support it, okay? Which is something you guys can do. You totally have this under control. Choose a position enabling you to come up with the best argument supporting details. So if you, this would even help if you're kind of indifferent and don't really care either way, analyze it, figure out which perspective, which opinion has a stronger argument and stronger examples. So with the intelligent machines one, if you felt like the examples saying that intelligent machines were overall a good thing for society, then go with that one, even if you personally disagree with it. Pick the side that has the strongest, pick the winning side, I guess. Pick the side that you feel like has the strongest and best examples, or if you can think of some really good historical reference or anecdote or example that would support it as well. So whatever you have the most, let's say, ammunition for, that is what you want to go for. All right? It's not really about what you actually think. Don't take it personally. So don't worry about the length, and I can tell you as an English teacher, I would much rather have a well-written, nice, concise, well-structured essay that is 4 paragraphs long than a 6-page essay that does not make any sense and is not well organized. And honestly, length can sometimes be not a great thing if you're kind of wearing out your reader, exhausting your reader with like tons of unnecessary examples or just going on and on about it. Remember, once again, that these ACT graders and these SAT graders probably have to grade a lot of these, probably in a short amount of time, and they're reading the same thing over and over and over and over and over. So length is not necessarily good. We and they are looking for well-written pieces with strong idea development that are well organized because it makes it easier to read. So once again, try to find in your soul a little bit of pity for the ACT and SAT graders. A clear connection to your audience. Grab me, make me care about it, make me think about it. That's always good. Your appropriate diction, you want it to have the right kind of tone, the right voice that's appropriate for the subject matter, that's appropriate for the audience. Once again, varied syntax. I know I said that before. You're going to want to kind of mix it up a little bit, make sure you have a variety of sentence structures, that your word choice is interesting to make it interesting for the reader. And action verbs, pick good words, pick good descriptive words, good action verbs. Don't make them completely wacky and completely inappropriate for the subject matter, but if you can think of something interesting, especially if it's just the perfect word. I know as an English teacher that always makes me smile when just the correct word is chosen. So if you can come up with a good word, yes, definitely do it. And I know I already said this, but prepare before you write, and that means that you should look at that prompt, really break that prompt down. It is definitely more than okay to circle keywords, underline things. What is the essay prompt really asking you to do? What should I be emphasizing? What is the essence of the question? What do I really have to respond to in order to get credit for this? Because if you just sort of gloss over, and I feel like I did this when I was in like my freshman and sophomore year of high school. I feel like I just sort of knew what the topic was, and I was like, I'm just going to write something. Not a good plan. You want to directly respond to that prompt. And if you can possibly turn the prompt around and turn it into like a declarative sentence and kind of make your thesis statement relate to that or be that declarative sentence, so much the better. Sometimes the prompts are too complicated to do that. You can't really manage it. And if that's the case, don't worry about it, but have that in mind. Definitely brainstorm on that pre-writing page in the test booklet. They provide that for a reason. They're not going to grade it or look at it, but it is a super, super good idea to map out what you're going to write. Because I know we said it is a kind of a polished pre-writing level that we're looking for, like a rough draft level, but the more organized and the more concise and the more developed, the better, definitely. It's a good idea to list your pros and cons for your perspective, to kind of start mapping out the direction you're going to take, advantages and disadvantages of what you're looking at, and then you're going to work on supporting those with examples. And you're going to really work on writing that clear pointed thesis statement. Remember how we had the 3-column slide a couple slides ago where we had you map out the 3, your opinion on the 3 perspectives. From there, you can determine what your thesis statement will be. It's like, once again, reverse engineering it. A clear pointed thesis statement, once again, don't make it too complicated because that is going to be your spearhead for the entire essay. Okay? Another way to prepare before you write, make sure that you really are leaning on that intro and making sure that it's a very close, intimate relationship with the prompt. It should be very directly related to the prompt. You should be looking back and forth between your intro paragraph and the prompt and making sure that they are responding to each other completely and thoroughly. If you can manage to, like I said, rewrite the prompt into an effective hook, if you can kind of reword it and condense it down into an interesting question that would provoke the reader to want to know more, that is ideal. Hooks are a great idea if you can manage them. Don't panic if you don't manage a hook, but if you can do it, that's just icing on the cake. And it can be kind of a question like, have you ever wondered if this, or did you know that this? Or it can just be kind of an interesting or surprising statement or fact. Any of these hooks will grab your reader, and they're a great idea. Once again, funnel your introduction toward that thesis statement. So a hook, some context, and a thesis statement. It's like a funnel, just like we said earlier. The thesis statement should be kind of at the bottom of your introduction paragraph and should lead us right into that body paragraph number 1. You can mention opposing views If you would like to, that's kind of upper level, a counter argument, if you will. But if that doesn't kind of work with the flow of what you're doing, or you don't have enough room, then that's okay as well. Draw a graphic organizer to kind of, graphic organizer to kind of help yourself. That 3-column slide from before, that's a good example. Or really anything you guys have done, I'm sure, tons of different graphic organizers to help yourself brainstorm. You can do a web, you could do a T-chart, you can do any variety of free-writing graphic organizer type things, or whatever works in your own brain. Everyone has their own brain. In order to make your point you're going to want to use, these are your supporting detail examples, reasons and logic, examples, analogies from personal experience or something that you have read. So anything you can pull in from the world out there. Obviously, like I said, you can't like get a research book and start quoting your sources because you can't do that in the ACT. But you can use, like I said, anecdotes, examples, things that have happened to you, things you've heard of happening, or well-known historical events or current events that are happening that you can pull in and use to support yourself, right? Okay, so here's an actual SAT grader, essay grader, what he or she said that he or she is looking for. They are looking for sentence variety, concrete detail in each body paragraph. 2 body paragraphs is plenty, doesn't have to be long. So once again, as an English teacher, I told you, we don't really want to read a 10-page essay. a nice, well-organized, well-supported essay that is short is way better. We want a clear thesis. They're going to be looking for clear transitions, lead us into the next topic. Sentences should ebb and flow in a natural adult sounding rhythm, so it should have kind of the kind of cadence, if you think of like adults having a conversation, kind of what that would sound like. Diction should match tone. You can use contractions. You can, use first and third person personal pronouns. In some essays and formal writing, I know you've been told to not use first and third person. In this particular piece, you can. Errors don't really count unless there are a lot or they're serious. So basically, if it starts impeding the SATs or the ACT's ability to just kind of get through the essay, or you start kind of wondering what they actually meant, like maybe you're consistently misspelling some really important term that's directly related to the meaning of your essay, that would be bad. But yeah, little errors here and there are not something to stress about. All right. Here is a practice prompt just for you guys to look at with different perspectives, just so you guys can kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. It says public health and individual freedom. Once again, look at that title. You have these 2 items kind of paired together with an and. I wonder what that's all about. Most people want to be healthy, and most people want freedom, as much freedom as possible to do the things they want. Unfortunately, these 2 desires sometimes conflict. For example, smoking is prohibited from most public places, which restricts the freedom of some individuals for the sake of the health of others. Likewise, car emissions are regulated in many areas in order to reduce pollution and its health risks to others, which in turn restricts some people's freedom to drive the vehicles they want. In a society that values both health and freedom, how do we best balance the 2? How should we think about conflicts between public health and individual freedom? So they're asking us to read and carefully consider these perspectives. Each suggests a particular way of thinking about the conflict between public health and individual freedom. Perspective 1 said, I'm going to get my, oops, I got a question. I'll address the question in a moment. Sorry, I was kind of in I'm in a flow right now. And I can go back if it's about a slide in the past. Our society should strive to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number of people. When the freedom of the individual interferes with that principle, freedom must be restricted. So that's leaning in one direction. Perspective 2 says nothing in society is more valuable than freedom. Perhaps physical health is sometimes improved by restricting freedom. But the cost to the health of our free society is far too great to justify it. And perspective 3 says the right to avoid health risks is a freedom too. So kind of the opposite. When we allow individual behavior to endanger others, we've damaged both freedom and health, which are all very well stated. So as you know, you'll be asked to first pick your perspective on it, kind of one side or the other, which should be sacrificed to support the other, health or freedom. And then you're going to kind of, obviously, that will put each of these into the categories of agreement or disagreement, which you will address. And then you're going to want to lace in, if you have an anecdote or facts that you know off the top of your head, you can kind of weave those in as additional support and create yourself a very well-written cohesive piece. And I'm going to look at these questions quickly while we look at that. Yes, okay, yes, it is, ma'am. Sorry, I kind of addressed that earlier. Good questions, guys. I love this. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see the questions in the recording or in where you guys are, but there, I will read them. I had a question. Someone said, is it okay to use first person and talk directly to the reader? Yes, with the SAT and ACT it is. Normally that's considered informal, right? And normally, and I don't know if you tell your students not to do that, but as an English teacher, I tell my students not to do that. Question about conclusions, paragraphs for the ACT. We need to state our thesis or at least paraphrase it in our introduction. So how do you restate it in the conclusion to help wrap it up? Very, very good question. Excellent. I would say to do that, you are going to want to restate it in different words. If your brain is fried and you restate it word for word, that's not the worst thing in the world, but I would try to avoid that if I were you. And it's more of an application. You are going to want to apply it to society as a whole. Apply it to what is going on in the world. What would happen if this really did happen in a widespread manner? What would happen if this were a policy? What would happen if this was just the case across the board? So it's more of an application. I hope that helps your question. Let me know if that didn't address it. And thank you for your questions. I appreciate them. I do. All right. Oops, sorry. I'm trying to get it to a spot where I can close it. There we go. Apologies. I'm going to. All right. Okay. And we don't have time to pre-write for this, but I just wanted you guys to see what another example of an essay looks like. That was the task you had to do. We talked about this. Public health versus individual freedom, those three perspectives, and then kind of, I'm sure you guys have lots of examples of things you've heard or seen, or even like things that have happened to you that relate to one versus the other. Okay? Now let's talk about the SAT. I'm going to be a little bit quicker with the SAT because I know that most people are taking the ACT, and in addition to that, it's very similar in a lot of ways. I'll talk to you about how it's different. Once again, it is optional. And once again, we recommend that you do it anyway. Sorry, I'm trying to get to non-drawing mode so I can actually change this over. It is more analytical. We're not, once again, at the core of it is not going to be the student's opinion. For the ACT, it was the student's opinion, and then you kind of weave and wrap the other things kind of around it. This, they're going to give you information, and you're going to analyze it. You're going to analyze the author's perspective and role and purpose and effectiveness, if that makes sense. It's always going to be the last section, once again. It's going to be, you have 50 minutes, which is better than 40 minutes, but it's a little bit more in detail, so you're going to need those 50 minutes. Once again, elevated rough draft quality. We don't expect, or they don't expect perfection, but you still need to have it polished and well thought out and well structured. And once again, it does not impact the overall composite score. So very similar in a lot of ways. The score is from 2 to 8, and once again, you have 2 graders, and the scores are added together. So this is a lot of repeat, that's why I'm kind of whooshing through this. Graders are individuals trained to score according to a rubric, once again, just like the ACT. They're all very official people. They're not just some people they hire off the street. They're probably teachers or professors or people who have been in education for a long time. Once again, it's scored holistically. They'll be looking at your essay as a whole. They're going to be considering structure, flow, word choice, the way the main points relate to the thesis, and so on. And in this case, the things that will be addressed are reading, analysis, and writing. And I will tell you kind of what we mean by this in a moment, in the next slide. So in order to score an advanced score for the reading section, the reading, of course, is whenever you're reading the text, the information, right? So this is when you are getting into it, digging into it, getting the information out of it. And of course, the graders will be able to tell if you've read well by the way you write it. So they'll be looking for you to demonstrate thorough comprehension of the source text, for you to show an understanding of the text's central ideas, the most important details, how they interrelate, demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of the text. They'll be looking for error. You should not, hopefully won't misinterpret something or get something wrong as you interpret it in the text. And you should make skillful use of that textual evidence in terms of quotations, paraphrasing, or both, demonstrating a complete understanding of that source text. That's the reading section. This is the analysis section. So once you've read it and comprehended it, you're then going to start breaking it down. Analysis literally means to break into small pieces and then look at those pieces. So to get a score of 4, you must show through your writing that you offer an insightful analysis of the source text and demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of the analytical task. You understand what you're being asked to do. Offer a thorough, well-considered evaluation of the author's use of evidence, reasoning, and or stylistic and persuasive elements, and or features of the student's own choosing, that's you. So you can kind of incorporate and include kind of things that you noted as well. Contains relevant, sufficient, and strategically chosen supports for claims or points that have been made. This is what we talked about for the ACT. Your support needs to be relevant and connected and strategically chosen. That's a good way of saying that. Focuses consistently on those features of the text that are most relevant to addressing the task. So don't emphasize things. There are going to be things in the text you don't even really need to talk about. Stick to the things that are important and are going to help you out. Okay? Finally, the writing. So once you have read it, analyzed it, then you have to get the writing down on paper, right? Is your writing cohesive? Does it demonstrate a highly effective use and command of language? Does it include a precise central claim? This is all kind of the same thing that we talked about with the writing structure of the ACT. Does it include skillful introduction and conclusion? Does the response demonstrate a deliberate and highly effective progression of ideas, both within paragraphs and throughout the essay? So that's cohesion within the essay, well organized. It all kind of flows upward toward that thesis statement. Does it have a wide variety in sentence structure? So once again, mix it up, make them complex compounds, switch up your wording. The response demonstrates a consistent use of precise word choice. The response maintains a formal style and objective tone. So you don't start getting heavily into like bias and opinion, and it doesn't start sounding kind of unprofessional in a way. Show a strong command of conventions and standard written English. It is free or virtually free of errors. So once again, that says free or virtually free of errors, but we know from the things we talked about that it should just be readable. Okay? Here's an extremely generic SAT prompt. You can kind of see where the blanks sort of are. They'll be filled out with specific information. Let me just read it through. As you read the passage below, consider how the author uses evidence, such as facts or examples, to support claims, reasoning to develop ideas and to connect claims and evidence, stylistic or persuasive elements, such as word choice or appeals to emotion, to add power to the ideas expressed. So obviously, the one you'll get will be much more specific than this, but these are the things you'll be expected to address on the SAT. You'll be expected to, and once again, obviously there's the blanks in there will be filled in with specific information. Write an essay in which you explain how the author builds an argument to persuade his or her audience that whatever the author is trying to argue for. In your essay, analyze how the author uses one or more features listed in the box above or features of your own choice to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument. Be sure that your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage. Your essay should not explain whether you agree with the author's claims, but rather explain how the author builds an argument to persuade his or her audience. So that's a very good point, the difference between the ACT and the SAT. The ACT, you are basically writing your own persuasive piece. For the SAT, you are analyzing somebody else's persuasive piece and evaluating if he or she was effective and why. It's a very important differentiation. Okay, thank you for sticking with me through all of that insane amount of information I just threw at you. I appreciate that. So be sure to register online with ample time. You do not want to be a last-minute person that's just panic-inducing for everybody involved. Look up the deadlines online. Register at least 5 weeks. Oh, the deadlines are 5 weeks before the actual test date, yeah. And many sites will fill to capacity, so register early. There's the website to register for the ACT. There's the website to register for the SAT. You have to upload a photo ID, so if you need to scan that and make it into a PDF or whatever kind of document they require, do that with enough time. Don't wait till the last minute and then panic. So, good questions, guys. This is great. How does the writing section help you with getting into colleges? What are some of the benefits? Great question. Excellent. So the writing section is separate from the composite score. Some colleges don't require it. I know I'm in Ohio, and Ohio doesn't. None of the colleges in Ohio require it. But if you're outside of Ohio, or you're going to go to college outside of Ohio, you're going to want to look into the specific requirements of your colleges of choice. You may be able to submit your writing score as like a placement score to see what level of English you're going to want to start in college. Whenever, your freshman year, what level of English you're going to need to take. It might be, remedial. It might be right on just basic freshman English. You might be advanced and you might be able to skip something. Who knows? Or, some schools actually require you to submit the writing score for admissions. And some of them don't want it at all. They won't even take it. So, Donald, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Next question, is the writing section calculated into the comprehensive score? No, it's separate because it is that kind of strange separate thing that serves a couple of different purposes for the people that are accepting it, the colleges that are accepting it. So it's an odd duck, right, the writing section, but I still honestly highly recommend that you take it at least once, especially if you're not positive which colleges you're going to apply to. You don't want to, like that poor student who had to take the ACT all over again at the very last minute, even though he already had a 28, he had to retake it because he didn't do it. So good questions, folks. Love it. Okay. And we have, and I think there's another slide here that is going to give you a little bit more contact information. Okay, so if you have additional questions besides what you just asked me, you can email info@leapprogram.com, write this down, and now would be the time for you to send me any other questions. I'll stay here for another minute or so, or 2 or 3. If you guys have any additional questions, I would love to answer them. You guys are fabulous. I'm going to open up my toolbar so I can kind of see you guys a little better. So there's going to be like a weird gray patch. Those are all really excellent questions. I'll stay here for another minute or 2 and see if there are any more. But if you are completely finished and you've gotten all of the information out of me you need, you're welcome to skedaddle and go off and do whatever you do with your evening. Thanks for putting up with my voice for an hour. You guys are great. That is a very good question. The question was, I don't know if you guys can see the questions on here, but the question was, in regards to the fact that the ACT prompts, are there any subjects they will not ask us about? They're not going to ask you about anything that's like super political or controversial or like really moral, ethical questions, nothing that's going to make you feel strange. It's going to be, I mean, you might get a question, I don't know, I don't want to say is the usual, but like, are you in favor of school uniforms or not? Or are you in favor of recycling or not? It's going to be, I don't want to say neutral, but it's not going to be anything crazy controversial that's going to, maybe upset you or anything like that. It's going to be pretty vanilla, if that makes any sense. Okay. Watching the webinar, good question. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. If you email the info that I've covered up now, of course, with my question box, let me scrooge it. Move it there, info@leapprogram.com, or call the LEAP number. They'll give you that information on how to get a hold of this webinar. But yes, it is available. I did record it, so you can hear it all again. Good questions, folks. All right, I will wait another minute since it seems like we do have some questions coming in. I'll wait another minute and then call it a night, okay? Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys. You guys are so nice. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Hopefully I don't miss an amazing question after I hit stop. That would be a pity. All right.